Now let's talk about science in the Bible.
Do we have to? The answer is yes. Yes, we do have to.
The Bible is certainly a book that has to be understood and accepted by faith. But that faith does not have to be an unreasoning, ignorant faith.
The word faith can mean a few different things. A lot of the time it's taken to mean confidence, but that's not what it means in a religious context. In religion, faith is accepting something not because of whether or not it's rational, but instead because of the nature of the belief. And I actually think that the Bible spells this out pretty well. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So it's basically saying that you can still believe in things that you don't really have proof for.
There doesn't need to be a war between God's Word and our pursuit of scientific understanding.
Not unless they contradict each other, which they do.
There are two things to keep in mind when talking about this subject. One is that science is simply a process for learning about the observable universe. And two, that the Bible is primarily a book for spiritual guidance.
You're right, the Bible isn't meant to be a science textbook, but it doesn't have to be in order for science to say that it's wrong. The Bible still makes claims about reality that we can test. Nobody's saying that the Bible is scientific literature, but we're trying to figure out if it's right or not.
The Bible isn't meant to be a science textbook. Now, that being said, it is an accurate description of nature from man's perspective.
I think it's kind of funny how you say from man's perspective, because that's exactly what it is, at least from ancient Hebrew and early Christian perspectives. But it's supposed to be divinely inspired. Why then does the Bible's explanation of nature seem like the best guess that could be made from the information that was available to those people at that time? Like the sun, moon, and stars just being lights in the sky and not necessarily their own bodies. And things like floods, plagues, and earthquakes being the result of God's actions and not just physical phenomena.
In scriptures that comment on the physical nature of the universe, a proper reading will not contradict what we can prove through scientific observation.
Really? Not even the firmament, which is just a solid dome that separates our atmosphere from a literal cosmic ocean, which is from a model of the universe that has long been disproven. Or what about how God populated the world via incest twice? And in the second time around, God repopulated all of the animals with between 2 and 7 of each species. And that was because of a worldwide flood that is physically impossible. I mean, where did the water come from? And where did it recede to? The answer, of course, is the cosmic ocean that I mentioned earlier, which doesn't actually exist. And what about a talking snake? Or the fact that snakes eat dirt? Or what about how homosexuality is perversion and by implication a personal choice that can be reversed? Because psychological studies have long shown that sexual orientation cannot be changed. Meaning if God does exist, He created homosexuals to be the way that they are and so that they would stay the way that they are. Or what about repressing sexual desires and not having sex outside of marriage? Because acting on sexual desires is a psychological need. So when God tells people not to do these things, He is psychologically harming them because of the way He made them.
Our free booklet, Is the Bible True? Has an...
For Sagan's sake, this is the third time he's tried to push this booklet on us in 15 minutes. That's an average of once every 5 minutes. Whatever's in that tiny booklet could probably be covered in the time you spent wasting trying to push it on us. And if you couldn't, I'm sure you could spare one of your 20-minute broadcasts.
But I would like to give one example here right now. Let's look at Moses. He was raised in an Egyptian home as the adopted son in the house of Pharaoh. Modern archaeologists have uncovered many artifacts from Egypt in Moses' day, and one of those artifacts is an Egyptian medical document. What it describes about what Egyptian doctors did to treat illness would make us feel pretty ill today. Some examples include using
statue dust, beetle shells, mouse tails, cat hair, pig eyes, dog toes, eel eyes, and goose guts. If somebody had a splinter, they would treat it with a salve of worm blood and donkey dung. We know today that dung is full of tetanus spores, so somebody in ancient Egypt might have died from lockjaw simply due to the way a doctor would have tried to treat a splinter.
Yet the Old Testament and the Bible doesn't prescribe any of those disgusting things for treating disease or illness.
Yes, the ancient Egyptians had a primitive and pseudoscientific medicine, but that's not surprising considering every early civilization has. In fact, BS medicine is still being practiced today, and that's ignoring the fact that their more surgical techniques are actually very advanced for their time. But the ancient Hebrew system of medicine is much worse, because there is none. As far as the Bible is concerned, if you want to be healed, just pray, and that'll work. And in fact, illness is caused by God just being mad at you. So is God just not mad at people who have modern medicine?
The law of Moses were simply something that Moses the man gave and not divinely revealed by God. No doubt he would have relied on his 40 years of growing up in Egyptian society when giving basic health advice.
That is, if he was actually there, which he wasn't.
Instead, he gave sanitation principles that were thousands of years ahead of their time.
What? No, he didn't. We'll get to his example in a minute, but the only real health advice that Moses gave, at least that I can find, is that if anybody is bitten by a snake, they just need to gaze upon this brass serpent that he made, and they will be cured.
Major disease epidemics through history have been caused because people didn't understand that good hygiene leads to good health.
Really? Because as far as the Bible is concerned, all plagues and pestilences are because God was angry.
In many places around the world, sewage would flow openly in the streets and contaminate the water supply. In stark contrast with that principle, God clearly instructed Israel on how to dispose of waste. He said, "Designate a place outside the camp where you can go to relieve yourself. As part of your equipment, have something to dig with. And when you relieve yourself, dig a hole and cover up your excrement."
Okay, well, let's read the next verse, for context.
For the Lord thy God walketh in the midst of thy camp, to deliver thee, and to give up thine enemies before thee. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, that he sees no unclean thing in thee, and turn away from thee.
So this was not about hygiene at all, but instead was for pleasing God, because he's going to be walking around in the camp and he doesn't want to step in your poop. But as far as hygiene goes, the Bible doesn't give a crap. Doesn't give a crap? Get it? Anyways, even in the Neolithic, things like pit latrines and chamber pots weren't actually uncommon, even though open defecation was a thing.
There are many more examples like this where scientific discoveries of modern times have proven principles in the Bible that are plain for anyone to read.
It's easy to assert that there's more just like this, but that's not actually convincing. Maybe there's more in that booklet, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
When the Bible does speak about practical matters of science, it is not only accurate, but centuries ahead of human experience and research.
Well, that's simply not true. The Bible is just through the eyes of the people of the time. I gave you several counterexamples earlier, but what about the talking donkey? I think it's interesting because it says that Yahweh opened the mouth of the donkey, so God was literally talking out of his ass.
Facts are tied to confusing, mystical statements that breed acceptance.